Welcome back to another video, folks, and another battle report. This is our third lockdown battle report, which means distance gaming. We did two before, which you may have seen, and we didn't particularly enjoy it. For me, it was a hell of a lot of running around. Wasn't very well at the time as well, and for Brian, he was very distant. We tried to improve things this time round by using different technology. We've used the camera I'm recording this on, for instance, was used to allow Brian to watch what was happening using an OBS software and a private YouTube live instead of just doing it over the messenger on the telephone. So it's workable, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination enjoyable. It's certainly not our preferred way of doing it, but the way things are looking in terms of social distancing and feeling confident about going to other people's houses and with your family there and everything, it's the only way we're going to get anything done just now. So the last couple of games, if you saw them, you'll have seen various conscript Soviets going up against veteran Germans. And it didn't go well, and I was kind of thinking, that's it, never again. No more conscripts for me. But looking back, we only played on the one table. It was an absolute brutal table to attack on, so we're going to give it another go, and we've got a few videos lined up for that. So we'll be using Enemy at the Gates and Iron Cross for these, and we'll be sticking to conscript forces from Enemy at the Gates, not taking any of the hero forces. Because you can take hero forces anytime, but there's not much other opportunity apart from mid-war to take conscripts. So I'm going to stick with them and see how they go. This game here is a game of dust-up. So the conscripts will still have all their weaknesses, but the veteran Germans will have to get up and do something to win the game themselves. They can't just sit there, and if they do, they'll lose. So that's a more rounded test of both lists. So don't be surprised though if the game starts off with nobody doing very much. It's quite often the case with dust up, especially when there's a lot of infantry on the table just staring at each other, open ground to cross to get shot to bits. They tend to wait until reserves arrive before the game starts to hot up. But over to the game, and hopefully it'll be nice and enjoyable with lots of action for you. Here's a quick look at the dust-up mission. You can see the deployment zones in the opposite corners. It's a meeting engagement, delayed reserves, and the rest of it you can read at your leisure. So that is translated in terms of the actual table onto what you see here. The Soviets got to choose the quarter to be the nominal attacker from. They placed one objective in here, and then they placed another objective in the German side over there. The Germans placed one objective between the wood and the houses, and they placed their objective over here. Now the reserves, like Brian's reserves, will come along on this half of the back edge, mine on that half of the back edge. So when you place an objective, you have to consider if you're going to attack from your own deployment zone or from where your reserves are going to arrive. So I reckon Brian is going to probably want to use his tanks to get to these guys, and I most assuredly would like to get my tanks in this way, but there's a lot of nasty stuff kicking about. Oops, I've started to place anti-tank guns on those bases, but there's Pak 38s. I'll go through the lists actually just now. So, reserves first of all. This is the same list as before for the Germans. We thought about messing around with things and tweaking things, maybe putting Nebelwerfers in or other artillery, but this is just such a neat list because there's 40 points of tanks there, 2 platoons of 4. They're all short barreled 50s. 3 Marders for some real anti-tank punch, 4 Pack 38s, 2 platoons of infantry, 1 on this objective, 1 on that objective, and then 4 mortars, 4 heavy machine guns, and the company command hanging about there. And then the Soviet target-rich environment over here. So they've got 2 platoons of basically conscript. They're all conscript really. Infantry. Got 1 here and 1 there. They've got 4 76mm. These are 57mm, but they're the same in terms of base sizes. 4 76mm tank guns. Once again, just a conscript variety. You can get confident veteran. You can get confident veteran 57mm, which are like just going to be so nasty. But we want to play with conscripts and see how they go. They've got a platoon of 3 heavy mortars, a platoon of 6 medium mortars, 3 heavy machine guns, 4 Katyushas, and then in reserve 9 Lees. Just standard Lees, no upgunning. So we'll have to roll off to see who goes first. So I'm going to make that roll, and I'll do it on camera, because in this mission, because it's a meeting engagement, the player who goes first cannot use artillery. So sometimes it's better just to go second, especially if you've got, like I have, 3 platoons of artillery, but this will be the time I roll a 6. So Soviet turn 1, it's really just a bit of movement. The infantry that were grouped around that objective have moved forward, so most of them are no longer dug in, but that's because when Brian's placed his objective, he's put it right up against the boundary of my deployment zone, and I don't want to lose a round of combat and get pushed back and potentially lose the game. I want Brian to have to fight all the way through them, and at the same time take counter fire from these anti-tank guns if they're still alive. And these 3 bases have moved up into that house. There's 5 bases inside the church now. As far as shooting goes, the guys, very few platoon bases of this platoon are in range. About 5 dice fired at these guys, but needed 6s, so missed. So nothing really much for the Soviets to do otherwise, because their artillery can't shoot and the heavy machine guns are just going to stay on the ground. So German turn 1, no movement. There's no point in approaching this horde of infantry. As far as firing goes, the mortars never ranged in. It's like Brian's using my dice. They tried, of all the possible targets, that was the most concentrated and perhaps most useful, because heavy machine guns and mortars. But they never ranged in, never rolled above a 3. The heavy machine guns though, they opened up on the mortars and managed to kill one at long range. I rolled 2 1s, I got 2 hits, I rolled 2 1s for saves, and then got 1 6. So he's killed a mortar, so he's starting to whittle them down. They're no longer getting rerolls, for instance, so they're just as useful as a 4-gun battery at the moment. So over to the Soviets, and they can try and start digging in and maybe even shooting back. So Soviet turn 2, these guys managed to dig in, they got a 5 up. The mortars unpinned. No other movement. So as far as shooting goes, the artillery opened up and they actually managed to range in. Here, the medium mortars ranged in first attempt. I rolled a 6, which is what I needed, and they hit everything you see there. 2 heavy machine guns, 4 mortars, and the company command, but they all saved. They all saved. Every single one of them saved. So Brian's dice rolling was not too shabby there. Then the heavy mortars failed to range in, and then the Katyushas ranged in. and the Katyushas managed to kill, once again they hit every single base, but only one failed save, and the Katyusha managed to get that. And then the heavy machine guns opened up on the heavy machine guns and actually managed to kill one of the heavy machine guns. So that's the artillery ranged in for a bit. There'll be a bit of a duel between those mortars and the light mortars. We'll see if Brian can unpin them next turn. So over to German turn 2. So German turn 2, the mortars unpinned. The infantry platoons who took hits from the Katyushas on either side unpinned, but the heavy machine guns didn't. And then, so the mortars wanted to take out these guys, and Brian rolled 3 ones for ranging in. So if it's 6 dice, it's almost like a role reversal here. 6 dice are not ranged in. But the heavy machine guns, even though they were pinned, still managed to kill another mortar. So they're getting whittled down one way or another. No movement from the Germans once again, because it would just mean charging out into open ground and lots and lots of rifle fire and plenty of other weapons. So over to Soviet turn 3, where they can start rolling for reserves. Right, end of Soviet turn 3. There's a lot of dead bases on the German side. The Soviets didn't get the reserves, everything else just stayed put, so they went straight on to firing. Most of the damage was done by the medium mortars, who unpinned. And as you can see, the heavy machine guns are down to 1 base, the medium mortars are down to 2 bases, and the company command dead. Both of them failed their saves. Firepower's passed against both, but then Brian rolled a couple of 2s to try and do his warrior save. So I expected him to move out and join the other platoons either side, but they've both bit the dust. So that's a big hole in the middle of the Germans' defences. I think they need some reserves next turn. So we'll see what Brian can do. He'll have some last stand tests, well, one last stand test to do for sure anyway. So that was a pretty uneventful turn for the Germans. The heavy machine gun unpinned and passed its last stand. The mortar was unpinned and actually managed to range in. They hit quite a few bases but didn't cause any casualties. The heavy machine gun fired but missed this turn. And that's about it really. So they didn't get the reserve, sorry. So the game's opening up a bit in a way that I wouldn't have expected. So we'll see what happens once the tanks get on the table. So, Soviet turn 4? I think so. They had 2 dice for reserves anyway, so that'll be turn 4. They got the reserves on. Now I had the option of coming up and hiding behind this hill, but the Marders could do a blitz, knock them out, blitz, and then shoot and scoot back, and these anti-tank guns still active in front of me, so I decided to take him on a different way. I'm going to come along here and then maybe think about taking on his armour with my own anti-tank guns to support me. And then as far as shooting goes, the heavy machine guns were pinned down, and otherwise the mortars, let me see, the heavy mortars actually ranged in again. I'll just ranged in for the first time, sorry, there, so that's useful. The other mortars stayed put and the Katyushas tried to range in on these guns and missed. There was quite a few hits over here from the mortars, but they all saved. So that's the Soviets got everything on now. I'd imagine the Germans will be joining them soon, and we'll see where it goes from there. So Brian got both reserves on at the same time, which is always handy. He's moved them behind the hill. His thoughts are that in this game you can play defensive. He could have just moved them over to defend his objectives, but then it's kind of game over for him. He's not going to stand much of a chance of taking an objective, so he's putting them in a position where he can threaten an objective and draw off my reserves, which is a sound plan. It means I'm not going in this direction, and if I do go in this direction, he's manoeuvring his anti-tank guns and his Marders, and these guys could very easily move out to intercept my tanks. And my tanks are hitting a 2, so I've got to be careful with them. One anti-tank gun failed its cross-check. It's not in a good place to be moving. The other ones have moved up. They want to get themselves in a position where they can get involved in the game. They're very vulnerable now they're out of their dug-in position. If they get hit by artillery and fail to save, they're gone. The infantry are worried about the artillery that's coming down there, so Brian's moved them up into houses or behind houses. These guys didn't unpin, and the mortars still in the game, still managed to unpin, and they killed another Soviet mortar, so they're down to just 3 bases now. So, Soviets have got all the reserves on. It's up to them now to do something with what's on the table before the Germans, it looks like, come at them in a pincer. So, Soviet turn 6. The Lees are parking themselves up, wondering what to do next. To be perfectly honest, can't really flush these guys out, so we'll see, but they can't just sit and wait either. As far as shooting goes, there was no other movement. The heavy mortars, the medium mortars didn't unpin. The heavy mortars managed to kill another base of German mortars. Actually, I didn't roll the hits against the platoon, I'll do that later. And the front anti-tank gun had actually strayed into range of the heavy machine guns, so they fired at it and missed, so Brian's got to be careful there. Another heavy machine gun fired at that house and got 2 hits, but they were, and 2 fails actually for saves, but needed 6s, couldn't get them. And the Katyushas tried to range in on anti-tank guns and failed again. So, over to German turn 6. So, quite an interesting turn for the Germans. They blitzed onto the crest of the hill, hull down. The Marders continued dashing to behind that hill. The anti-tank guns are dashing. 2 of them are failing the bog checks, so they're getting split up in terrain. These guys failed to dig in, just staying on the ground. The mortar stayed but failed to unpin, and these guys have failed to unpin. And as far as shooting goes, these guys were getting hit in 2s because the elevation ignored the low terrain, the cover from the low terrain. And so you can see there's 2 destroyed and 3 bailed. And one of those was a double bail. So they took a bit of a spanking. Unfortunately for Brian though, one of these platoons rolled a 2 and hasn't come back down off that ridge. They'll still be hard to hit, but there is at least a chance of shooting them. So we'll see what the Soviets can do before these guys lend their anti-tank 12 to the action. Soviet turn 7, the Horde is probably unwisely getting up and on the move. So a couple of things. One, Lee didn't get back in. The mortars over there are still pinned. That's about it for motivation. These guys, I decided to stop them scouting and shooting. I'm going to get my infantry to join the fight. You can't be shooting at my tanks and my infantry at the same time. And then these guys, seeing how things were going in the centre, decided to move out. And as you can see, another couple of bases have fallen victim. That was to the heavy mortars, and the Katyushas ranged in a 3rd attempt here. Didn't hit anything, but it's a very dangerous position for the Germans to be in. And the heavy machine guns managed to get one of these got on the ground guys and kill that as well. So Brian's got some decisions to make. Staying put and going for a mad assault might be an idea, but then again, lots of infantry in the open, he might be able to just go machine gun me to bits and defend that objective. So we'll see what he decides. Forgot to mention shooting at the tanks. The anti-tank guns did all the damage really. The tanks got a couple of hits, really just one from the 75s, but the anti-tank guns managed to get 4 6s, which was quite good. So German movement, Brian has decided to stick it out over here, and he did a blitz move onto the hill successfully. He blitzed his Marders. he managed to get anti-tank guns out of the terrain, and he's been moving them over. The mortar not only stayed but unpinned, and these guys didn't unpin, these guys did unpin. So as far as shooting goes, the Marders, Brian's decided these guys are an immediate threat, so the Marders actually just used their machine guns and killed the base, and then these guys fired at nothing, and these guys over here fired, killed another couple of bases. Why the mortar, by the way, I forgot to mention, it fired and killed one of the Russian mortars. There's now only 2 Soviet mortars left, and these anti-tank guns also fired off a couple of shots but didn't hit. And then against the Lees, they managed to bail 2 more and destroy 1, I think. Anyway, it's pretty slow, mainly down to firepower. They're getting tons of hits. The Lees got a half decent save against them, especially at range. Most of them are at long range. But then there's that firepower, 4-up firepower. So, we'll see if the Soviets... Oh, one more important thing. These guys are taking turnabout to fail their shooting scouts, so they failed. It puts them in a bit of a tricky situation, to be honest, because Brian was hoping that these could all be supporting each other in counterfire, so we'll see what I can do with these Soviets maybe coming around the flank. So in this turn, these guys have gone to ground. They tried to dig in but couldn't. They couldn't approach any closer with artillery still bombarding. These guys moved up and 5 bases moved around the side of the hill. I'll explain why they're not there in a minute. And then as far as shooting goes, it was extremely unsuccessful. Very few hits and all the saves were made. And then over here though, the artillery is just getting quite punishing. I mean, they're on the last stand. There's a big gaping hole here that Brian will have to now react to. But over here I did an assault, come around the side to reduce counter fire. They still got 6 hits, which was pretty good. Not enough to pin because of the number of the platoon, or possibly it is. I'll check the roll, but anyway, 6 hits and 5 failed saves. So they all died. So, over to Brian to see what he's going to do about defending that objective now. So a couple of starting step things. He unpinned and stayed, as did the mortar. Those guys didn't unpin. And then this mortar managed in 1 turn to kill another mortar and 2 heavy machine guns. And then as far as movement goes, these guys stayed still, and then Brian's brought these round. 2 of them have dashed. These 2 moved up and managed to kill that bailed out tank that's been hit every turn and survived up until now. These moved up to machine gun, and they were the only guys who actually managed to kill anything of these front infantry. So I'll have to see if I can push on to that objective, but I don't see how that's possible with all these tanks still alive, and there's only 5 operational Lees at the moment. So this turn was a bit of a revenge of the Lees. The infantry stayed put still, too much machine gun shots coming at them, and they failed to dig in. The mortar and heavy machine gun passed the last stands. The bailed out Lee didn't get back in. So these guys stayed put, tried to dig in and didn't. 2 anti-tank guns moved up, 2 stayed still, 3 Lees moved up, and the rest, was another 2, stood still. But then in the shooting they absolutely hammered these tanks here, and they've got 5 hits on them. 1 destroyed, 1 bailed, and then the anti-tank guns got a double bail, and other anti-tank guns fired, hit over here, but they saved. So we've got 2 platoons down to 2 tanks each. The heavy mortar tried to range in again onto the the Marders, surviving the light mortar, missed firing at that mortar, and the Katyusha's ranged in here. Didn't get any hits, but it's in position now. So over to Brian for whatever the hell turn it is for the Germans. Brian decided the Panzer IIIs would try and just take on the Lees with the Marders actually doing what they're supposed to do. So these fired, got loads of hits and did nothing. These fired, got a few hits and killed 3 Lees. You know, front hammer 5 going up to 6 against anti-tank 12. The best they can get is a bale. And as far as the other shooting goes, only one base of infantry bit the dust. That was from these guys on pinned over there, and these 2 have stayed. And I believe actually if these 2 fail, it's actually game over, because that's only going to be 1 actual combat platoon left on the table. So it comes down to them, as if the Russians can survive another turn of shooting. So in this turn, the heavy machine gun ran away, and the mortar stayed. These guys finally got dug in. I'll just get that out of the way. And it was revenge of the Lees again. The survivors actually managed to kill 2 Panzer IIIs. These guys had moved up in case there was some bailed out stuff they could assault, but no, there's not. And anti-tank guns, one of them moved up, so they're all in range, but they missed. These got 1 hit from the Katyushas, but saved, and he wasn't hit. The mortar was hit, but saved. So, Germans are still clinging on. So the Panzer IIIs are moving away, as are the Marders. Actually, Brian could have done a follow me there, so he couldn't do a dash, but there you go. 4 up, I'll give him a follow me. That's alright, Brian. Mortar ran away, he's not ran away, but to be honest, it's just a matter of time. I could just sit and concentrate all the artillery on him and so on, so we're just going to call it there as a victory for the Soviets. And in the end they lost the heavy machine gun platoon, took a bit of a battering with their infantry and their Lees, but otherwise that was it. So it's a bit of a turnaround from the last game, and I think the main difference, the main reason was they weren't just charging over open ground in a prepared position, and the artillery actually ranged in this time and was effective. But there was some good old tussles here. Panzer IIIs, they were a bit unlucky at times because they needed 6s to get hit, and one turn they got 4 6s, but it was a good tussle, them against the Lees. It's a nice even fight. The Marders never got to do too much in this game, but what they did do when they could was just brutal. Killed 3 tanks in 1 turn. German infantry couldn't do much. I think Brian will agree that if they'd have come out and attacked, they'd have just got shot down in the same way as these guys got shot down. A marvellous assault over here. 5 bases running in, 5 bases getting killed. Most of them are 3s for the saving throws, by the way. So they would have made it if they were an ordinary, or they would have survived if they were an ordinary infantry type. And the anti-tank guns never got to do much. I think it was the right move for me not to try and take them on. I could have tried and blown them up, but I think there's no guarantee that I would have done it, and then my tanks might have just been stuck out there with the Marders, excuse the light there folks, with the Marders just blitzing and shooting and scooting from behind that wood. So it went okay for me. Hard for me to give you Brian's thoughts just now because he's on the end of a phone, but he did at least enjoy the game. There was a lot more to it than the last couple of games anyway, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll get another one up for you just as soon as we can. So we declared that as a victory for the Soviets, but we made a wee mistake. I forgot that the Pak 38s were part of the formation. They're in the support section of the book as far as the stats go, but as far as the if order of battle goes for the formation, they're in there as a formation unit. So we're going to call that a honourable draw for the Soviet conscripts and a bit of a kick in the face kind of draw for the Germans. But if we'd played on, the Soviets no doubt would have won just by attrition, but time, time. They've not got all day just to sit there and shoot. They could have pushed their infantry forward and maybe got onto that objective, but well, we played plenty of rounds and the time for pushing forward with the Soviets was probably sooner. They should have done it sooner and just tried to take the pain and predicted that that objective would be free. But overall thoughts for the game is the Soviet artillery actually did what it was supposed to do. Well, what artillery is supposed to do, and it killed lots and lots of infantry. It was quite brutal. Opposite of the last games that I've played where they just wouldn't range in. In this case, we're ranging in quite regularly. Killing the company command in one turn for the poor old Germans was a bit of a blow. That doesn't usually happen. Even if you kill them, they normally get their warrior save. But there you go. Made a bit of a difference to the game. And Brian, as far as what Brian did with putting the tanks in an offensive way instead of a defensive way, it gave him a chance of potentially winning the game, whereas if he'd have just brought his tanks around to defend his objective, there was no prospect of him winning the game. So he gave it a go. His Fritz move, the blitz and shoot and scoot didn't work. When it does work, it can be really brutal and you can just pop up, shoot, and there's not much the other player can do about it. I got my infantry out to try and take the crest of the hill to force them away. It would have been a great deal of casualties for me, but I could have pushed up my anti-tank guns, pushed up my tanks. But as it was, there was plenty of targets with the failed shooting scoots. So it developed in a bit of a different way. But that was a good solid square off, and the conscripts did better than the last time, so I'm quite happy with that. And Brian's quite happy with how the Germans did accept all the dying that the infantry did to the artillery. Anyway, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next one where we will be back on the Eastern Front again.